I never imagined that living in the quiet suburbs of Alpharetta, Georgia would turn into a full-blown war with my homeowners association. But here I am, sitting on my back porch watching the president of our HOA literally lose her mind over a fuel delivery truck parked in my driveway. My name is Zachary Sullivan, and I have been living in the Meadowbrook Estates subdivision for about 3 years now. I work from home as a software engineer, which means I need reliable power at all times. When I moved in, I quickly realized that our area was prone to power outages, especially during severe weather. So I did what any sensible person would do and installed a natural gas generator system that could power my entire house during outages. The installation cost me about $15,000, but it was worth every penny for the peace of mind. Everything was fine until about 6 months ago when Wendy Blackwell moved into the neighborhood. Actually, I cannot use that last name, so let me correct myself. Her name is Wendy Bradford, and she is the exact definition of what the internet calls a Karen. Within 2 weeks of moving in, she had already filed 3 complaints with the HOA about various neighbors. One guy had his trash cans visible from the street on a non-trash day. Another family had a basketball hoop that she deemed unsightly. A third neighbor had the audacity to park their work van in their own driveway overnight. But Wendy was not satisfied with just being a complaining neighbor. Oh no, she had bigger aspirations. She attended the next HOA board meeting and somehow convinced the other board members to elect her as president. I say somehow, but I know exactly how. She brought homemade cookies, buttered them up with compliments, and then spent 2 hours presenting a detailed PowerPoint about how she could bring our property values up by enforcing the covenant rules more strictly. The previous president, a retired teacher named Margaret, was more than happy to hand over the reins. She had been looking for an excuse to step down anyway. That is when things started going downhill fast. Wendy took her new position very seriously. Too seriously. She began patrolling the neighborhood in her white Lexus SUV, looking for violations. She carried a clipboard, a camera, and a printed copy of our HOA covenants that she had highlighted and annotated. I am not exaggerating when I say she drove around at least twice a day, sometimes more. The first time she knocked on my door, I thought maybe she was introducing herself or trying to be neighborly. I was wrong. She stood on my front porch in her tennis outfit, visor and all, holding her clipboard like it was the Constitution itself. "Good morning. I am Wendy Bradford, the HOA president," she announced without waiting for me to respond. "I am here to inform you that your mailbox is not Regulation Black. According to Section 7, subsection C of our covenants, all mailboxes must be either black or dark bronze. Yours appears to be a charcoal gray, which is not acceptable." I looked at my mailbox, which had been there when I bought the house. It looked black to me. "That is black," I said. "No, it is charcoal gray. I can tell the difference." "You have 30 days to repaint it or replace it, or you will be fined $50 per day until you come into compliance." Before I could argue, she was already walking back to her SUV, checking something off on her clipboard. I stood there completely baffled. That was my introduction to HOA President Wendy Bradford. Over the next few months, she found violations everywhere. My grass was a 1/4 inch too tall one week. I had a package sitting on my porch for more than 24 hours, which apparently violated some aesthetic rule. My car was parked in the driveway instead of the garage one evening when I was unloading groceries. Each infraction came with a formal letter, printed on HOA letterhead, citing the specific covenant and the potential fine. I started keeping a file of all her letters. So did most of my neighbors. We would meet up occasionally at the neighborhood park and compare notes. Everyone had stories about Wendy. She had fined the Johnsons because their Halloween decorations stayed up until November 2nd. She threatened the Rodriguezes because their daughter's pink bicycle was visible in the garage when the door was open. She even tried to fine old Mr. Peterson because his guest parked on the street instead of in a driveway during a birthday party. But I tried to stay out of her way. I mowed my lawn regularly, kept my mailbox painted the exact shade of black she approved, and made sure nothing was ever out of place. I thought if I just followed the rules to the letter, she would leave me alone. I was wrong about that too. The trouble started in early January when I needed to schedule my annual generator maintenance. I had a contract with a company called Reliable Generator Services out of Atlanta. They came out once a year to do a full inspection, change filters, test the system, and refill the fuel tank if needed. My generator ran on diesel fuel, which was stored in a 250-gallon tank hidden behind some landscaping on the side of my house. The tank was professionally installed, permitted, and completely up to code. I scheduled the maintenance for January 15th, a Wednesday morning. The technician, a guy named Marcus who had been servicing my generator since I got it, called me the day before to confirm. "I will be there around 9 in the morning with the fuel truck," he said. "Should take about 2 hours total." "Sounds good," I told him. "I will be working from home, so just ring the doorbell when you arrive." That morning, I was on a video call with a client when I heard shouting outside. At first, I tried to ignore it, but it got louder and more aggressive. I excused myself from the call and went to look out the front window. What I saw made my blood pressure spike instantly. Wendy Bradford was standing in my driveway, blocking the fuel truck from getting closer to my house. The truck was one of those medium-sized commercial vehicles with a large tank on the back. It was clearly marked with the company logo and had all the proper safety placards. Marcus was standing outside the truck, looking confused and frustrated. I grabbed my keys and headed outside, already knowing this was not going to go well. "What is going on?" I asked as I approached. Wendy spun around, her face already red with anger. "This commercial vehicle is not allowed in a residential neighborhood. It is a safety hazard and an eyesore." Marcus looked at me apologetically. "I've been trying to explain that I am just here to service your generator, but she would not let me through." "Wendy, he is here to do scheduled maintenance on my generator. He does this every year. It takes a couple of hours and then he leaves." "I do not care what he is here to do," Wendy snapped. Section 12, subsection A clearly states that no commercial vehicles are allowed to park in driveways or on the street for extended periods. This truck is an absolute monstrosity and I will not allow it. I felt my jaw clench. First of all, it is not parking for an extended period. He is doing work. Second, that rule is about residents parking commercial vehicles overnight. This is a service vehicle doing a job. The covenant says no commercial vehicles, period. It does not make exceptions. She crossed her arms over her chest triumphantly. Marcus stepped forward, trying to be helpful. "Madam, I service generators all over this area. I have never had anyone tell me I cannot park my truck to do the work. The fuel hose only reaches about 20 feet, so I need to get reasonably close to the tank." "I do not care about your hose length," Wendy said, her voice dripping with condescension. "You need to leave immediately or I will call the police and have you towed." I could feel my temper rising. "Wendy, you cannot just call the police because you do not like something. He is not doing anything illegal. He is on my property, with my permission, doing legitimate work. Your property ends at the curb, Zachary. Your driveway is still part of the subdivision and subject to HOA rules." I am within my rights to enforce our covenants." She pulled out her phone. "I am documenting this violation with photos and video. You will receive a formal notice of violation and you will be fined." Marcus looked at me with a defeated expression. "Man, I have got 3 other appointments today. I cannot sit here and argue all morning. Do you want to reschedule?" I wanted to tell him to stay, to push through, but I could see this was going to turn into an all-day drama with Wendy. "Yeah, let me call the office and figure out another time. I am really sorry about this." "Not your fault, buddy. I have dealt with HOA people before. They are the worst." Marcus climbed back into his truck and carefully backed out of my driveway while Wendy stood there filming the whole thing like she had just won some kind of victory. After the truck left, I turned to confront Wendy. "You do realize that I need that generator serviced, right? It is a safety issue. If something goes wrong and it does not work during an outage, that is on you." "Then you should have thought about that before you installed such an eyesore on your property," she retorted. "And you should certainly think twice before bringing industrial equipment into our neighborhood." "It is not industrial equipment. It is a service truck, like a plumber's van or an electrician's vehicle. Are you going to block every service person who comes to this neighborhood?" "If they are driving oversized commercial vehicles, yes, I will. We have standards here, Zachary. Some of us care about maintaining the character of this neighborhood." With that, she turned on her heel and marched back to her SUV, her tennis skirt swishing with each step. I stood in my driveway, absolutely fuming. I went back inside and immediately called Reliable Generator Services to reschedule. The earliest they could come back out was February 12th, almost a month away. I took the appointment, but I was not happy about it. That afternoon, I received an email from the HOA with the formal violation notice attached. It cited Section 12, subsection, and included several photos of the fuel truck in my driveway. The fine was $100 for the violation, plus an additional $50 per day if the violation continued. Since the truck had left, I assumed that meant I was only on the hook for the $100 fine. I was wrong about that too. The next day, I got another email stating that I was fined an additional $100 for scheduling unauthorized commercial services, and that any future attempts to bring commercial vehicles onto the property would result in escalating fines. I was also informed that I needed to submit any future service requests to the HOA board for approval at least 2 weeks in advance. I had never been the type to get involved in neighborhood drama, but this was absolutely insane. I sent a carefully worded email back to the HOA board, explaining that generator maintenance was necessary for safety, that the service vehicle was not parked for an extended period, and that the covenant was being misinterpreted. I cited examples of other service vehicles that came through the neighborhood regularly, including lawn care trucks, pest control vans, and moving trucks. I requested that the fines be waived and that a reasonable exception be made for necessary home maintenance. Wendy responded within an hour. Her email was 3 paragraphs of condescending explanation about how she was the president, and she understood the covenants better than I did. She offered no compromise and made it clear that the fines would stand. She ended the email with, "Perhaps next time you will think twice before violating our community standards." I paid the fines because I did not want them to escalate further, but I started researching Georgia HOA law extensively. I learned that while HOAs do have broad authority to enforce covenants, they cannot be unreasonable or discriminatory in their enforcement. I also learned that homeowners have the right to challenge HOA decisions and fines through the proper channels. I started documenting everything, taking screenshots of emails, keeping copies of all letters, and even setting up a security camera that covered my driveway and front yard. February rolled around and my generator appointment was coming up. I decided to try a different approach. I submitted a formal request to the HOA board 2 weeks in advance, exactly as Wendy had demanded. I included the date, time, company name, description of services, and even photos of the truck so they knew what to expect. I explained that the generator required annual maintenance per manufacturer specifications, and that skipping maintenance could void my warranty and create safety hazards. The board met the following week. I was not invited to attend. I received their decision via email 3 days later. Request denied. The reason given was that commercial vehicles were prohibited, and that I should find alternative service methods that did not require large trucks entering the subdivision. I called Reliable Generator Services and asked if there was any way they could service my generator without bringing the fuel truck. Marcus was sympathetic but firm. "Not really, man. I can do the inspection and maintenance without the fuel, but your tank is going to need a refill soon. You are down to about a quarter tank based on my readings from last time, and I cannot exactly carry 200 gallons of diesel fuel in the trunk of my car. We need the truck." I explained the HOA situation to him, and he laughed bitterly. "Yeah, that is why I do not live in an HOA. But here is the thing, legally speaking, they cannot actually stop me from doing my job on your property. If you give me permission and I am not breaking any actual laws, the HOA can complain all they want, but they cannot physically stop me. Of course, they can fine you into oblivion, which is probably their plan." That gave me an idea. What if we did it early in the morning before Wendy starts her patrol? Marcus considered this. I could probably get there around 6:30 in the morning. I would have to shuffle some things around, but I could make it work. Most HOA people are not up and about that early. Let's do it. I will take the fines if I have to, but I need my generator serviced. We scheduled it for February 20th at 6:30 in the morning. I did not submit another request to the HOA because I knew it would just be denied again. I figured it was better to ask for forgiveness than permission at this point. I set my alarm for 6 o'clock that morning. I made coffee and watched from the window as Marcus pulled up right on schedule. The sun was just starting to come up and the neighborhood was quiet. Perfect. Marcus got to work immediately, running his diagnostic tests and checking all the components. I went outside to chat with him while he worked. "Everything looking good?" I asked. "Yeah, system looks great." "You take good care of it. I am going to change the filters, top off the fluids, and then we will get that fuel tank refilled. Should be done by 8:30 at the latest." Everything was going smoothly until 7:15 when I saw a white Lexus SUV turn onto my street. My heart sank. Wendy was up earlier than usual, probably because she somehow knew or suspected something was happening. She pulled up to the curb in front of my house and got out wearing a bathrobe and slippers, her hair still in curlers. She must have been watching from her window and saw the truck. She marched up my driveway with her phone already out and recording. "I knew it. I knew you would try to sneak this by me," she shrieked. "This is a direct violation of the board's decision. You were explicitly denied permission for this service." Marcus looked up from his work, wrench in hand. "Madam, I am almost done here. Just need another hour or so. You need to leave immediately. This vehicle is not authorized to be here." I stepped between Wendy and Marcus. "Wendy, go home. You are trespassing on my property. He is doing necessary maintenance on my equipment, and you have no legal authority to stop him. I am the HOA president. I have every authority to enforce our covenants. You have the authority to fine me, which I am sure you will. but you do not have the authority to disrupt a contracted service on my private property. Now please leave." Wendy's face turned an alarming shade of purple. "You are going to regret this, Zachary. The board is going to hear about this. You will be fined so heavily that you will wish you had never bought in this neighborhood." "That is fine. File whatever complaints you want. But right now, you need to leave my property." She stood there for another moment, clearly trying to decide if she wanted to escalate further. Finally, she turned and stomped back to her SUV. But she did not leave. She sat in her car at the curb, watching and recording everything. Marcus worked as quickly as he could, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. When it came time to refill the diesel tank, he had to run the hose from the truck around to the side of the house where the tank was located. The whole time, Wendy sat in her SUV, filming and occasionally getting out to take photos from different angles. By 8:45, Marcus was finished. He packed up his equipment and gave me the service report. "All done. System is in perfect shape. Fuel tank is full. You are good to go for another year, assuming your HOA lady does not burn your house down first." I thanked him and paid the invoice. As he drove away, Wendy finally left too, but not before rolling down her window and shouting, "You are going to pay for this." I went inside and tried to focus on work, but I was too anxious about what was coming next. I did not have to wait long. By noon, I had received an email from the HOA with the subject line, "Urgent Violation Notice." The email detailed multiple violations, including unauthorized commercial vehicle, unauthorized services, defiance of board decision, and something called willful disregard for community standards. The total fines came to $850, due immediately. I drafted a response explaining that I had the right to maintain my property and that the HOA was overstepping its authority, but I never sent it. Instead, I decided to consult with a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. I found one in Atlanta named Robert Chen who had excellent reviews. I sent him all my documentation and scheduled a consultation for the following week. Attorney Chen reviewed everything and gave me his assessment. "You have a solid case for challenging these fines. The HOA is clearly being unreasonable and potentially discriminatory if they are allowing other service vehicles but singling out your generator service truck. However, litigation is expensive and time-consuming. You are probably looking at $10,000 to $15,000 in legal fees, and it could take 6 months to a year to resolve. My advice would be to first try to work with the board, maybe request a hearing, and see if you can get some reasonable compromise. If that does not work, then we can discuss legal action." I took his advice and submitted a formal request for a hearing with the HOA board. I cited the relevant Georgia statutes regarding HOA governance and homeowner rights. I requested the opportunity to present my case in person and to have the fines reviewed by the full board, not just Wendy. The hearing was scheduled for March 8th at the community clubhouse. I prepared a presentation with photos, documentation, and even a printed copy of the generator manufacturer's maintenance requirements. I was ready to fight this properly. The board consisted of 5 members: Wendy as president, a vice president named Tom Harrison, a treasurer named Linda Martinez, a secretary named Jeff Cooper, and a member-at-large named Sandra Price. I had met most of them in passing but did not know them well. The hearing took place in the clubhouse's small meeting room. The board sat on one side of a long table, and I sat on the other side facing them. Wendy had a stack of papers in front of her that looked ominously thick. Tom Harrison, the vice president, opened the meeting. "We are here tonight to to discuss the violations filed against Zachary Sullivan regarding unauthorized commercial vehicle access and defiance of a board decision. Wendy, would you like to present the HOA's position? Wendy stood up, which seemed overly formal for the setting, and began reading from her notes. She spent 20 minutes detailing every interaction we had had, every violation notice, every email exchange. She presented photos of the fuel truck, measurements she had taken of the vehicle's dimensions, and even testimonials from other neighbors who she claimed were disturbed by the truck's presence. I did not recognize most of the names she mentioned and suspected she had coached people or exaggerated their concerns. When she finished, Tom looked at me. "Zachary, you have the opportunity to respond." I took a deep breath and launched into my prepared statement. I explained the necessity of generator maintenance, the safety implications of skipping service, and the fact that the service vehicle was temporary and not violating any actual laws. I showed them the manufacturer's maintenance schedule and explained that the fuel truck had to get reasonably close to refill the tank. I also pointed out that many other service vehicles came through the neighborhood regularly, without any complaints from the HOA. "Just last month," I said, "the Hendersons had a moving truck parked in front of their house for 2 days while they moved in. The Chens have a lawn care service that brings a trailer full of equipment every week. The Millers had a pest control truck in their driveway for 3 hours last week. None of those were cited for violations. I am being singled out for something that is necessary home maintenance." Linda Martinez, the treasurer, nodded thoughtfully. "He makes a good point. We do have a lot of service vehicles in the neighborhood." Wendy jumped in immediately. "Those are different. Those are standard residential services. A fuel truck is an industrial vehicle that poses safety risks." "It is not an industrial vehicle," I countered. "It is a commercial service vehicle, just like a plumber's truck or an HVAC company's van. And it is fully licensed and insured for residential service." Jeff Cooper, the secretary, flipped through some papers. "I am looking at Section 12, subsection A, and it does say no commercial vehicles, but I think the intent was to prevent residents from parking their work trucks here overnight. I do not think it was meant to prevent legitimate service calls." Wendy's face tightened. "The covenant does not make that distinction. It says no commercial vehicles, period." Sandra Price, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "But Wendy, we have to be reasonable. If we interpret it that strictly, nobody could ever have any work done on their house. No plumbers, no electricians, no one. That is not realistic." "I am simply enforcing the covenants as written," Wendy insisted. Tom Harrison looked uncomfortable. "Okay, let's take a vote. All in favor of upholding the fines against Zachary, raise your hand." Wendy's hand shot up immediately. Nobody else moved. She looked around in disbelief. "Are you all serious right now? We have clear violations here." Tom cleared his throat. "All in favor of dismissing the fines and allowing reasonable accommodation for necessary home maintenance services, raise your hand." 4 hands went up. Tom, Linda, Jeff, and Sandra all voted against Wendy. "The motion passes," Tom said. "The fines are dismissed, and going forward, we will interpret Section 12, subsection as applying to overnight parking of commercial vehicles by residents, not temporary service calls." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. "Thank you. I appreciate the board taking a reasonable approach to this." Wendy was seething. "This is unacceptable. You are all undermining my authority as president. I will not stand for this." "Wendy," Linda said gently, "you are not a dictator. The board makes decisions collectively. That is how HOAs are supposed to work." Wendy gathered her papers and stood up abruptly. "Fine. But do not come crying to me when property values tank because this neighborhood turns into a commercial parking lot." She stormed out of the room, leaving the rest of us sitting in awkward silence. Tom sighed. "Well, that went about as well as expected. Zachary, you are all set. Sorry about all this trouble." I thanked them again and left the clubhouse feeling vindicated. I thought that was the end of it. I was very wrong. Over the next few weeks, Wendy seemed to back off. I did not receive any violation notices, and I rarely saw her driving around the neighborhood. I assumed she was sulking after being overruled by the board, but she was actually planning something much more sinister. In late March, I received a notice in the mail that there would be a special meeting of all homeowners to discuss amendments to the HOA covenants. The meeting was scheduled for April 6th, and attendance was strongly encouraged. The notice did not specify what amendments were being proposed, which I found suspicious. I marked it on my calendar but did not think much of it until a few days before the meeting when my neighbor, David Johnson, stopped by. David was a reasonable guy, an engineer who worked at a tech company in Atlanta. "Hey, did you see the proposed amendments Wendy is pushing?" he asked. "No, the notice did not include details. What is she proposing?" David pulled out a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "She hand-delivered these to everyone yesterday. I guess you missed her. Check this out." I unfolded the paper and read through the proposed amendments. My stomach dropped. Wendy was proposing 5 new rules, all clearly aimed at me. 1. No generators allowed on any property, except in cases of medical necessity, with documented proof. 2. All exterior home improvements or equipment installations require advance written approval from the HOA board. 3. Any homeowner who defies a board decision will be subject to a mandatory review and potential forced sale of property. 4. Commercial service vehicles over 10 feet in length are prohibited from entering the subdivision. 5. The HOA president has the authority to make emergency decisions without board approval if community standards are at risk. "This is insane," I said. "These are all designed to target me specifically." "Oh, we know," David said. "She has been going door to door trying to get people on her side. She is telling everyone that your generator is dangerous and that you are bringing down property values. A lot of people do not really care, but some of the older residents are buying into it. Can she actually do this? Can she just propose amendments and change the rules?" "Technically, yes. If she gets a majority vote from homeowners at the meeting, the amendments pass. We have about 60 homes in the subdivision, so she needs 31 votes." I spent the next few days doing my own door-to-door campaign, explaining the situation to neighbors and asking them to vote against the amendments. Most people were sympathetic, but a lot of them did not want to get involved in HOA drama. Some told me they probably would not even attend the meeting. The night of April 6th, I arrived at the clubhouse to find it packed. Apparently, Wendy had done an excellent job of drumming up attendance. She stood at the front of the room with a microphone, looking very pleased with herself. The meeting was called to order, and Tom Harrison tried to maintain control, but Wendy dominated the proceedings. She presented her case for the amendments, painting me as a reckless homeowner who was endangering the community with my industrial generator and unsafe practices. She showed photos of my generator, which was neatly installed and properly maintained, but she described it as if it were a nuclear reactor in someone's backyard. When it was my turn to speak, I explained that my generator was legal, permitted, and installed by licensed professionals. I explained that the proposed amendments were retaliatory and would affect everyone's property rights, not just mine. I pointed out that banning generators would actually hurt property values because many buyers in our area specifically looked for homes with backup power. Several other homeowners spoke up in my defense. David Johnson gave a great speech about property rights and the importance of not letting the HOA become a dictatorship. The Rodriguezes talked about how they were planning to install a generator themselves, and these amendments would prevent that. But Wendy had her supporters too. An older woman named Patricia complained about the noise from my generator during a recent power outage, even though my generator was installed with a professional-grade muffler and was quieter than a normal conversation. A guy named Keith talked about how service trucks were tearing up the roads, even though our subdivision roads were in excellent condition. Finally, it came time to vote. Tom explained that each household got one vote and that a simple majority was needed for the amendments to pass. Paper ballots were distributed and collected. The board counted the votes while we all waited in tense silence. After about 15 minutes, Tom returned to the front of the room with the results. For the proposed amendments, 26 votes. Against the proposed amendments, 31 votes. The amendments do not pass. I exhaled deeply, relief flooding through me. Wendy looked like she had been slapped. She grabbed the microphone from Tom. I demand a recount. Some of these people should not have been allowed to vote. Wendy, everyone who voted is a homeowner in good standing, Tom said firmly. The vote was fair and the amendments failed. That is the end of it. This is not over, Wendy said, her voice shaking with rage. Not by a long shot. She stormed out of the clubhouse for the second time in as many months, and this time she actually peeled out of the parking lot in her Lexus. April turned into May, and the weather in Georgia started getting warmer. We also started having more severe weather, which meant more frequent power outages. Our power grid in this part of Alpharetta was above ground for the most part, so strong storms often knocked out power for hours or even days. The first significant outage happened on May 14th during a severe thunderstorm. The power went out around 8 in the evening, and my generator kicked on automatically within 10 seconds, just as it was designed to do. My lights stayed on, my internet stayed connected, and I continued working without interruption. I could see through my windows that the rest of the neighborhood was dark. I felt a little guilty about having power when my neighbors did not, but that is exactly why I had installed the generator in the first place. I had made the investment to ensure my home would be functional during outages. The power came back on around midnight, about 4 hours later. I did not think much of it until the next morning when I found a note taped to my front door. It was from Wendy, handwritten on HOA letterhead. Your generator noise disturbed the entire neighborhood last night. This is unacceptable. I am filing a noise complaint with the county, and you will be hearing from them soon. I crumpled up the note and threw it away. My generator was well within the noise ordinances for our county. I had specifically checked that before having it installed, but I knew Wendy would not let it go. Sure enough, 2 days later, a code enforcement officer from Cherokee County showed up at my door. He was a middle-aged guy named Officer Davidson who seemed tired and annoyed. I got a complaint about generator noise, he said. Mind if I take a look at your setup? Not at all, I said, leading him around to the side of the house where the generator was installed. He inspected it thoroughly, checked the muffler, and even pulled out a decibel meter. Fire it up for me, he said. I went inside and flipped the manual start switch. The generator hummed to life. Officer Davidson measured the noise level at various distances. After a few minutes, he shut off his meter and nodded. You are at 58 decibels from 10 feet away. The county limit is 70 decibels. You are well within compliance. Plus, you have got a top-of-the-line muffler system. This is actually one of the quieter residential generators I have seen. So no violation, I asked. No violation. Your generator is legal and properly installed. Whoever complained is wasting everyone's time. He made some notes on his clipboard and handed me a copy of his inspection report. Keep this for your records. If they complain again, just reference this case number and we will tell them the same thing. I thanked him and watched as he drove away. I immediately scanned the inspection report and emailed it to Wendy with a brief message. Generator inspected by County Code Enforcement. No violations found. Please do not file false complaints. She did not respond, but I knew she had received it because I had requested a read receipt. June arrived with even more severe weather. We had multiple thunderstorms and even a tornado warning that had everyone sheltering in their basements. The power went out 3 times that month, each time for several hours. Each time my generator performed flawlessly, and each time I received nasty notes from Wendy about noise, safety concerns, or aesthetic issues. I stopped responding to her notes. There was no point. She was not interested in facts or reasonable discussion. She just wanted to make my life difficult. The situation reached a boiling point in early July. The National Weather Service had been tracking a severe storm system that was moving across North Georgia. They were predicting damaging winds, hail, and potential tornadoes. The power company had already issued warnings that outages were likely and could last for several days due to the expected severity of the damage. I made sure my generator was fueled and ready. I had just had it serviced in February, so I knew it was in perfect condition. I stocked up on groceries and water, charged all my devices, and prepared to ride out the storm. The storm hit on July 8th in the late afternoon. It was one of the worst storms I had experienced since moving to Georgia. The wind was so strong it was bending trees nearly in half. Hail the size of golf balls pounded my roof. The sky turned an eerie green color that made everything feel apocalyptic. The power went out around 5 in the evening, and this time it was clear that it was not coming back on quickly. I could see several downed trees just in my immediate area, and I later learned that multiple power lines had been completely destroyed across the county. My generator kicked on as usual, and I settled in to wait out the storm. By nightfall, the worst had passed, but the damage was extensive. I walked around my property with a flashlight and found some minor damage to my fence and gutters, but nothing serious. Many of my neighbors were not so lucky. Several had trees down in their yards, and one house had significant roof damage from a fallen oak tree. The power company estimated that it would take at least 3 to 5 days to restore power to our area. Some places might take even longer. This is where things got interesting with Wendy. I learned from David Johnson that Wendy had also purchased a generator after the previous outages, but she had gone with a cheaper portable unit rather than a professionally installed whole house system like mine. Her generator required manual refueling every 8 to 10 hours, depending on the load. The first day of the outage was relatively uneventful. I worked from home as usual. My internet stayed up thanks to my battery backup system, and my refrigerator kept all my food cold. I could see neighbors sitting on their porches trying to stay cool, and I felt grateful for my air conditioning. On the second day, I noticed Wendy's generator running loudly in her backyard. Her unit was much louder than mine because it did not have professional sound dampening. I found this ironic given all her complaints about my generator noise, but I did not say anything. The third day is when her generator started running into problems. I was outside surveying more storm damage when I heard her generator sputter and die. A few minutes later, I saw her in her driveway, struggling to carry a fuel canister from her garage. She had apparently run out of diesel. Now, here is where I need to explain something about the storm damage and the fuel situation. Because the outage was so widespread and was expected to last so long, there was a run on fuel at all the local gas stations. Most stations had sold out of gasoline and diesel within the first 24 hours. Some stations had no power to pump fuel at all. The ones that did have generators of their own were charging premium prices and had lines that stretched for miles. I had filled my generator tank during the February maintenance, and my 250-gallon capacity meant I could run for weeks without refueling if I needed to. Wendy's portable generator had maybe a 5-gallon tank, which meant she needed to refuel constantly. Over the next few hours, I watched from my window as Wendy made multiple trips to her car, presumably trying to find fuel. She would leave and come back empty-handed, growing more frustrated each time. By the fourth day, her generator had been silent for over 24 hours. The temperature outside was in the mid-90s with high humidity, brutal conditions without air conditioning. I knew her house had to be unbearable. That afternoon, I heard a knock on my door. I opened it to find Wendy standing there, looking haggard and desperate. Her hair was messy, her clothes were rumpled, and she had dark circles under her eyes. "I need your help," she said without preamble. "I cannot find fuel anywhere. My generator has been out since yesterday morning. Do you have any extra diesel I could buy from you?" I stood there for a moment, looking at this woman who had made the last 6 months of my life absolutely miserable. She had tried to block my maintenance service, fine me thousands of dollars, change the HOA rules to force me to remove my generator, and filed false complaints with the county. Now she was at my door asking me for help. "No," I said simply. Her eyes widened. "What?" I said. "No. I do not have fuel to spare. But your generator has been running for 4 days straight. You must have a huge tank." "I do, and I need all of it because I do not know when power will be restored. I am not giving away my fuel." "I will pay you," she said desperately. "Whatever you want. Name your price." "It is not about money, Wendy. It is about the fact that for the past 6 months you have done everything in your power to make my life difficult. You tried to prevent me from maintaining this very generator. You tried to force me to remove it. You filed false noise complaints. And now you want me to bail you out. That is not happening." Her expression cycled through disbelief, anger, and then desperation again. "Please, my house is like an oven. All my food has spoiled. I have not had a hot shower in 2 days. I need help." "You should have thought about that before you waged a personal war against me and my generator. Maybe if you had focused on being a decent neighbor instead of being an HOA tyrant, I would be more inclined to help you now. But you made your bed, Wendy. Now you can lie in it. You cannot do this. This is cruel. What is cruel is trying to ruin someone's life because you are on a power trip. I told you back in February that I needed my generator serviced for safety reasons. You blocked my fuel truck and tried to find me into oblivion. Well, I got my generator serviced anyway, and now it is working perfectly while yours is out of fuel. That is called consequences." She stood there shaking with rage and desperation. "The HOA will hear about this. I will make sure everyone knows what kind of person you are. Go ahead. I am sure they will be very sympathetic when they hear that the HOA president who tried to ban generators is now begging for fuel because her cheap generator ran out. That will go over great." Wendy turned and stormed off my porch, but not before shouting back, "This is not over, Zachary." I closed the door and went back to my comfortable, air-conditioned house. I will admit, I felt a twinge of guilt, but it was a very small twinge. She had brought this entirely on herself. The power outage stretched into the 5th and 6th days. The power company was working around the clock, but the damage was extensive. Our subdivision was low on the priority list since we were residential and not critical infrastructure. I continued to watch the drama unfold across the neighborhood. Many residents had left to stay with family or friends who had power. Others were toughing it out, sitting on their porches with battery-powered fans and coolers full of ice when they could find it. Wendy's house remained dark and silent. I saw her leave on the 5th day with several suitcases, presumably going to stay somewhere else. I assumed that was the end of it, but on the 6th day, something strange happened. I was working in my home office when I heard a loud engine outside. I looked out the window and saw a large diesel fuel truck backing into Wendy's driveway. It was not from Reliable Generator Services, the company I used. This was a different company, and the truck was even bigger than the one that serviced my generator. The irony was not lost on me. After everything Wendy had done to block my fuel truck, she had called in an even larger one for herself. I grabbed my phone and started recording. 2 technicians got out and began running a hose to her generator. I watched as they refilled her portable unit and did some maintenance on it. The truck sat in her driveway for over an hour, far longer than my service had ever taken. I was not the only one who noticed. Several neighbors had come out to watch, and I could see them taking photos and videos too. David Johnson walked over to my house. "Are you seeing this?" he asked, laughing. "She called in a fuel truck after all that drama about your truck." "Oh, I am seeing it and recording it. This is golden. Wait until the next HOA meeting." After the fuel truck left, Wendy's generator roared back to life, but she still had not returned to her house. The generator ran all afternoon and into the evening. The power finally came back on late that night, 7 days after the initial outage. My generator automatically shut off when it detected grid power restored. I went around the house, checking that everything had transitioned properly. Everything was fine. The next morning, I saw Wendy's Lexus pull back into her driveway. She got out looking refreshed, clearly having spent the past few days somewhere with power and air conditioning. She glanced over at my house, and our eyes met for a moment. She quickly looked away and went inside. Over the next few days, the neighborhood slowly returned to normal. People repaired storm damage, cleaned up debris, and restocked their refrigerators. There was a lot of chatter about the outage and who had generators and who did not. Several neighbors told me they were planning to install generators of their own after experiencing the week-long outage. I expected Wendy to come after me again with some kind of retaliation, but she was surprisingly quiet. She did not send any violation notices, did not call any special meetings, and seemed to be keeping a low profile. Then, about 2 weeks after the power was restored, I found out why. Tom Harrison stopped by my house one evening with interesting news. "Thought you would want to know," he said. "Wendy resigned as HOA president." "Really? Why?" "Well, after that fuel truck showed up at her house during the outage, a lot of people were pretty upset about the hypocrisy. She had made such a big deal about your generator and your fuel truck, and then she turned around and did the exact same thing. Plus, several people started asking questions about how she had been running the HOA. Turns out she had been making a lot of decisions without board approval and had been pretty liberal in interpreting the rules when it suited her. So, what happens now? We are going to have an election for a new president. In the meantime, I am acting president. And one of my first acts is to formally clarify the rules around generators and service vehicles. We are putting in writing that generators are allowed and that service vehicles for home maintenance are permitted. No more ambiguity. That is great news, Tom. Thank you. Thank you for standing up to her. A lot of us knew she was out of control, but nobody wanted to be the target of her wrath. You forced the issue, and it needed to be forced. After Tom left, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Wendy's reign of terror was over. The HOA was going to be reasonable again. I could maintain my property without harassment, but the story does not quite end there. About a month later, in early August, I was at the neighborhood park with some neighbors having a casual cookout. It was a nice community gathering, something that had not happened much when Wendy was in charge because everyone was too stressed about HOA violations. David Johnson pulled me aside during the cookout. "Hey, did you hear about Wendy?" "No, what about her?" "She is moving. I saw the for sale sign go up yesterday." "Seriously? She is leaving?" "Yep. Apparently she cannot handle living in the neighborhood after resigning in disgrace. Plus, I heard from Linda Martinez that Wendy is facing some legal issues related to HOA funds. Seems she may have been spending HOA money on personal things and covering it up in the accounting." "Wow, that is serious." "Yeah, the board is doing a full audit right now. If they find what they think they are going to find, they might press charges." I did not feel joy at this news, just a sense of justice being served. Wendy had let power go to her head, and it had ultimately destroyed her position in the community. 2 weeks later, I saw moving trucks at Wendy's house. I was outside doing some yard work and could not help but watch as her belongings were loaded up. She came outside at one point and saw me watching. She stood there for a moment, and I thought she might come over and say something, but she just turned and went back inside. By the end of August, Wendy's house was empty and on the market. The for sale sign prominently advertised generator included as a selling point, which I found darkly amusing. The HOA held elections in September, and Linda Martinez was elected as the new president. She was fair, reasonable, and actually cared about making the neighborhood a pleasant place to live rather than a prison camp. One of her first initiatives was to organize a neighborhood emergency preparedness committee, and she asked me to be on it given my experience with backup power systems. The committee put together resources for residents about emergency preparedness, including information about generators, battery backups, and other systems. Several neighbors ended up installing their own generators over the following months, and there was never any HOA drama about it. In October, the HOA board completed their audit of the financials from Wendy's tenure as president. They discovered that she had used HOA funds to pay for personal expenses, including landscaping for her own home, fuel for her personal generator, and even some of her legal fees from when she was trying to build a case against me. The total misappropriation was around $8,000. Tom Harrison called me with the news. "We are filing charges. This is embezzlement. The board voted unanimously to pursue criminal charges and to try to recover the funds." "What happens now?" I asked. "We have turned everything over to the Cherokee County District Attorney's Office. They will decide whether to prosecute. Given the amount and the clear evidence, I think they will." I thanked Tom for keeping me informed. A few weeks later, I read in the local newspaper that Wendy Bradford had been arrested and charged with felony theft by conversion and embezzlement. The article detailed how she had misused her position as HOA president to enrich herself at the expense of the community. The legal process moved slowly, as these things do. Wendy hired a lawyer and initially pleaded not guilty, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. The HOA had meticulous records of every expenditure she had made, and forensic accountants had traced the money directly to her personal accounts and services. In early December, I received a subpoena to testify at a hearing. The prosecution wanted me to detail the conflict I had had with Wendy, and the lengths she had gone to in her vendetta against me. I testified truthfully about the blocked fuel truck, the violation notices, the fines, and her attempts to change the HOA rules. The prosecutor used my testimony to establish a pattern of behavior, showing that Wendy had abused her authority and used HOA resources for personal vendettas. My story, combined with the financial evidence and testimony from other board members, painted a clear picture of someone who had let power corrupt her completely. In January, almost exactly 1 year after this whole saga began, Wendy changed her plea to guilty as part of a plea deal. She was sentenced to 2 years of probation, 150 hours of community service, and was ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA plus court costs. She was also permanently banned from serving on any HOA board in the state of Georgia. I attended the sentencing hearing along with several other members of the HOA board. Wendy looked like a completely different person from the confident, aggressive woman who had blocked my fuel truck that January morning. She was subdued, defeated, and clearly humiliated by the whole experience. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, she stood and gave a brief apology. I let the responsibility of being HOA president go to my head. I made poor decisions and I hurt people in this community who trusted me. I am sorry. It felt hollow, but I suppose it was something. The judge accepted her plea, issued the sentence, and that was that. Wendy left the courthouse and I have not seen her since. Life in Meadowbrook Estates returned to normal after that. Linda Martinez proved to be an excellent HOA president, focused on actually improving the community rather than nitpicking every minor violation. The neighborhood became a pleasant place to live again. I still have my generator, and it still gets serviced every year by Marcus from Reliable Generator Services. The fuel truck pulls right into my driveway without any drama, and I never worry about losing power during storms. We have had several significant outages since that 7-day stretch in July, and each time I am grateful for my generator. Several of my neighbors who installed generators after that experience have thanked me for standing up to Wendy and fighting for our right to have backup power systems. David Johnson jokes that I am a neighborhood hero, which I think is overstating it. I just stood up for my rights and refused to be bullied by someone on a power trip. But I will admit, there is something satisfying about knowing that I handled the situation correctly, and that justice was ultimately served. The house that Wendy used to live in was eventually sold to a nice young couple with 2 kids. They kept the generator, and I helped them learn how to maintain it properly. They are great neighbors, and we have become friends. Looking back on the whole experience, I learned some valuable lessons about HOA politics, property rights, and standing up to bullies. I also learned that sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all, but simply letting someone experience the natural consequences of their own actions. Wendy blocked my fuel truck and tried to prevent me from maintaining my generator. As a direct result, when the big outage hit, my generator was in perfect working condition and hers was not. When she ran out of fuel and came begging for help, I simply declined to bail her out. I did not sabotage her. I did not vandalize anything. I just let her generator run empty, while mine kept working exactly as designed. The fact that her desperation led her to call in her own fuel truck, exposing her hypocrisy to the entire neighborhood, was not my doing. The fact that the subsequent scrutiny led to the discovery of her embezzlement was not my doing. I just stood my ground, maintained my equipment, and let karma do the rest. These days, when I hear my generator kick on during a power outage, I smile a little. Not because I am gloating over Wendy's downfall, but because I am grateful that I fought for my right to have this system. I made a smart investment in my home's infrastructure. I stood up for my property rights when they were challenged, and I ultimately prevailed against someone who thought they could bully me into submission. The generator hums quietly in the background, keeping my lights on, my internet running, and my house comfortable no matter what the weather throws at us. It is a reminder that sometimes the best way to deal with difficult people is not to sink to their level, but to simply maintain your boundaries and let them dig their own hole. I still live in Meadowbrook Estates, and I plan to stay here for many years to come. The neighborhood is peaceful now, the HOA is reasonable, and my generator is ready for the next storm. That is all I ever wanted in the first place. Sometimes I see new residents moving into the neighborhood, and I wonder if they know the history of what happened here. I wonder if they know about the HOA president who tried to ban generators and ended up with a criminal record. Probably not. It is just neighborhood lore now, a cautionary tale about what happens when someone lets a little bit of power go to their head. But for those of us who lived through it, it is a reminder to stay vigilant about HOA governance, to stand up for our rights, and to never let anyone bully us out of making smart decisions about our own properties. We pay HOA fees for community maintenance and reasonable standards, not for dictatorial control over every aspect of our lives. The experience also brought the neighborhood closer together in an unexpected way. We all bonded over our shared frustration with Wendy's reign of terror, and that bond has lasted. We look out for each other now. We share information about home maintenance, we help each other during emergencies, and we make sure that the HOA board stays accountable and reasonable. Last month, we had another significant power outage during an ice storm. My generator performed flawlessly once again, and this time, I was able to help some of my neighbors by letting them use my garage to charge their devices and by sharing some of my hot coffee. It felt good to be able to help people rather than being in conflict with them. That is what a community should be. People helping each other, respecting each other's property rights, and working together to make the neighborhood a better place. Not people on power trips trying to control every minor detail of their neighbors' lives. As I sit here writing this story from my home office, with my generator sitting ready in case of the next outage, I feel grateful for how everything turned out. Yes, it was a stressful and frustrating experience dealing with Wendy. Yes, there were times when I wanted to just give up and either remove my generator or move to a different neighborhood. But I am glad I stood my ground, because now I have a generator that keeps my house running during outages. I have an HOA that is reasonable and focused on actual community improvement. I have neighbors who respect each other and help each other out. And I have the satisfaction of knowing that I did not let a bully win. Wendy Bradford learned a hard lesson about the consequences of abusing power and embezzling from the community she was supposed to serve. She lost her position, her reputation, her home in the neighborhood, and ultimately gained a criminal record. All because she could not stand the idea of me having a generator and the fuel truck that came with maintaining it. Meanwhile, my generator is still here, properly maintained and ready for whatever comes next. And that fuel truck will be back next February for the annual service, pulling right into my driveway without any drama, exactly as it should be. That is the real ending to this story. Not dramatic revenge or escalating conflict, but simply the quiet victory of reasonableness over tyranny, of property rights over HOA overreach, and of natural consequences teaching the lessons that need to be taught. The generator sits outside my window right now, silent but ready. A $250,000 investment in peace of mind and energy independence. And every time I look at it, I remember the fight it took to keep it, and I feel proud that I did not back down in the end. Wendy did not block my fuel truck. She tried, but she failed. My generator got serviced, my tank got filled, and when the big outage came, I was prepared while she was not. That is not revenge. That is just being a responsible homeowner who planned ahead and refused to let anyone prevent me from protecting my investment. And now, whenever storm clouds gather and the power flickers, I do not worry. I know my generator will kick on within 10 seconds. I know I will have power for weeks if needed. I know I made the right choice in installing it, fighting to keep it, and refusing to let an HOA tyrant take it away from me. That is the real satisfaction. Not watching someone else fail, but knowing that I succeeded in protecting what was mine and standing up for what was right. The generator hums, the lights stay on, and life goes on normally while others sit in the dark. That is all I ever wanted, and that is exactly what I have.